Thank you all for joining us. As was introduced, I am Jay Williams. I have the privilege and the opportunity of serving as the president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. It will be 1 year that my family and I have relocated here to Connecticut in a couple of weeks, and it has flown by, and I can't tell you how excited we are really to be settling in and to be engaged in what tonight will be hopefully a very productive discussion. We made a commitment last year to engage and reintroduce ourselves to all 29 of the communities that we serve. And we are 14 communities into these discussions, these listening tours, and the feedback couldn't be more refreshing and productive. So before we get started, there are just a couple of housekeeping items that I want to mention. And one of them is that we have a live doodle right behind me. Costanza from Veo Designs is going to grace us with her talent in capturing some of the discussion and energy that is going on here this evening. So we're going to show a brief video, and then I'm going to come back and really look to engage in a discussion that is so important to us in the work that we do today and the work that we are planning to do going forward. So we are a community foundation, as was described in the video. The Hartford Foundation for Public Giving is the largest community foundation in the state of Connecticut. We are one of the largest in the entire country. We serve a region encompassing 29 communities. So as much as we are a regional community foundation, we are also your community foundation, the community foundation of Rocky Hill, the community foundation of Wethersfield. And the fact that we've been around for 93 months speaks to the generosity that exists in this community, speaks to the trust that we have, that has been placed in the foundation by donors and families across many, many decades, and we never take that for granted. That being said, while we've been around for 93 years, we also recognize that times have changed. The landscape has changed. The landscape of Connecticut, the landscape of the greater Hartford region, the landscape and the challenges facing our individual communities. That's why, with the support of the board, that we have embarked upon this listening tour to really reintroduce ourselves to the communities in which we serve, but to more importantly hear from them, the aspirations, the frustrations, the things that they love about their community, asking a question: how can we be a more impactful partner? How can we be more powerful in terms of the resources that we have, the ability to leverage, the ability to build knowledge and share that knowledge and sustain that knowledge across all of the communities that we serve. And as I said a few minutes ago, we have been at this since about February. We have covered probably 13 or 14 communities now. We have had very frank, candid discussion. We have heard areas that we've fallen short and can do better. We have heard areas that people are exceptionally pleased about the relationship. We've heard opportunities to deepen that relationship. But this works because these are the things that people have shared with us. And it is not, we didn't come here to offer a monologue or for me to offer a soliloquy, but to hear from you in a very intimate way about how we as your community foundation moving forward can be a more impactful and powerful partner. And the things you share with us are helping us to shape our next strategic plan. We are in the midst of putting together our next strategic plan that will help guide our work for the next 3 years. And there's no more important input than we can have than from those stakeholders, those donors, those nonprofit partners that we have. And the fact that you have showed up here tonight means that you see that as important, you see your community as important, and that's what we want to hear. So thank you for those of you who have shown up. I know we have elected leaders here from both Rocky Hill and Wethersfield. We've got some of our nonprofit partners. We've got concerned citizens and stakeholders. Just quickly, how many of you heard about this through some of our outreach on social media or email or, okay? How many of you word of mouth? Good. From friends and neighbors and things like that? Good, good, good. And some of you just showed up, you just figured, there was a sign out, Hartford Foundation, refreshments, thank you all. So that being the case, this is where we want to hear from you. As I've said, there's lots of interaction and engagement we like to do. And I say this at every event that, we want to hear from you. We've got staff members here. In fact, a significant number of our staff members actually call Wethersfield home Wethersfield and Rocky Hill home. So we're playing on their home turf. So, I want to hear from them, but I can hear from them sort of like all day, every day. And I welcome that. So, but we're glad that they showed up to show the pride in their community, and want to get this started by, giving you some of those questions as to what makes your town special. What are the things that you have aspirations for? Where are the areas that are frustrating? Where might your town figure its role in the region? And helping us to understand how we can be a more valuable partner is why we're here. So I'm going to open it up. And, I see some familiar faces, some new faces. I don't take this as a shy crowd. And like I always say, that if, we don't get some immediate responses or comments, if you make eye contact with me, I'm going to take that as a sign that you have something to say. So you can either do it your way, or you can, cast your gaze away from me and hope that I don't make the eye contact. But really, that's where we want to open this up, is a discussion about the special nature of both of these towns, and how we as a foundation, as your community foundation, can utilize our talent, resources, the generosity that we've been afforded by donors and so many others to really help achieve those things that would continue to improve the quality of life or mitigate some of your concerns in both Rocky Hill and Wethersfield. So I'll open it up for questions, comments, observations, and get us started. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I'm Margaret Mader from Rocky Hill. I work for Connecticut Landmarks, of which Butler McCook House in Hartford and Isham Terry are members, and I'm a tour guide there. And I want to say thank you very much for being one of our supporters. That means a lot. A concern I have for Rocky Hill was, I don't know if this organization can get involved in it or not, was we were given a survey about a year or so ago about our senior center. And so far, nothing has been improved in that, and I don't know if this is an organization that can get involved in that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And when you say improve in terms of the physical improvement, some of the things that need to occur or programming, or both?
There would be things that would be added into the, there were several things we could check off that we would like in the senior center that aren't there.
Okay. We would welcome that conversation. And I'm going to early on take a line that our Judy Rossi Battle, who is not here, she's our Senior VP of Community Investments, is that if ever in doubt, pick up the phone and let's have a conversation about some of those needs and some of those issues. And you'd be surprised and we'd be surprised. Sometimes it's just a matter of, oh, we didn't realize, or a community member didn't realize that those are areas that we would certainly welcome and entertain a conversation about, of how we can be helpful. And that is something that we've heard in a number of communities. The concerns of those that don't have a senior center that would like to have it be a hub of activity. Those that do have a senior center often find themselves at capacity. So we would welcome that conversation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sally Distilli. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Wethersfield Public Schools. So first of all, I'd like to thank you and your organization for the support you provided Wethersfield. We have enjoyed the collaboration and the networking opportunities, and have learned a lot from our experts across the state, and other connections that have been made. So one of the pieces that resonates well with me is the idea that it takes a village to raise a child. And it's not about just parents and public education. It's about the community partners and the larger view of looking at supporting the youth from birth, even maternal to birth, early childhood, and really through, but also the college and career. As I'm also a parent that has 2 high schoolers, and we're starting to look at that college piece. That's a really big challenge for some parents. And so looking at that whole stage of prenatal to adulthood, and but also looking at it through difference. So through some of our work of supporting multiple generations, but breaking down the silos. I've come to really embrace the idea of it takes a village, and how do we break down the silos in a systematic way to really meet community needs. As I know more people that you would call about seniors, not really seniors, right? So how do we meet their needs? How do we meet early education, K-12 education, but really meet family needs? And looking at our younger generation through different lenses and breaking down some of those silos that we have, and to work together to better meet needs of families.
Right. Thank you. So you have hit on a number, it's almost as if you've been sort of sitting in some of our internal staff discussions about that continuum of investment and quality of life from not just zero, but prenatal through childhood and into education and into career and beyond. In the later, I don't mean seniors as in elderly, old people, but those who have matriculated through life. And you use the term silos, and one of the things that we are working on within the foundation is to break down the silos within the foundation. We have a lot of expertise and depth and experience that goes very deep in early childhood, in education K through 12, in providing support to post-secondary education through our scholarship programs, our investments in community and senior centers. And we believe we are doing very good work, but too often, unintentionally, that work becomes siloed. So we are looking introspectively first to figure out how we better leverage the expertise and the experience that we have within the foundation to start working across many of those areas, and then to have that translate into our investments and our relationships with the community. So to hear that also as a priority from a stakeholder on the outside is consistent with what we're doing. And we believe, and you also talked about that 2-gen approach, and that's something that our staff in the early childhood has been working on, is that the needs of the families, when you talk about the needs of children, whether it's in early childhood or as they get into the grade school years, they can't be isolated and separated from the needs of the parents or the guardians. So simply trying to address one side of that equation without recognizing the needs of the individuals who are providing that care and that guidance and that love is short-sighted. So that's very much an approach that we have been embracing and continue to embrace. And to the extent that the knowledge and experience that we have can be shared, and the practical application of that that you and others have in the field, and all the plans are great, but it's the application in real life scenarios that really help us to learn and guide and shape how we make those investments. So we would very much welcome that. And as we move forward, part of what I said a few minutes ago is that we want to share that knowledge throughout the region. We want to bring additional expertise and knowledge within the region. So we work and collaborate with community foundations across the region. We work and collaborate with community foundations across the country, because there are other similarly situated communities that are facing those same challenges. And if they have an approach that is proven to be effective, that might shed some light to our partners here in the greater Hartford region, we want to do that, and vice versa. We firmly believe there are innovative things that are going on here in the greater Hartford region. They're going on perhaps in Wethersfield or Rocky Hill that we want to also be able to serve as a platform for other communities to learn from us. So thank you very much for sharing. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Sue Fendley. I'm the president of the newly formed Wethersfield Education Foundation.
The newly formed Wethersfield
Yes,
Education.
and we
Congratulations.
appreciate you coming here. We're putting our ducks in the row, trying to get everything established and so forth. And our goal essentially is to support and enhance the Wethersfield Public Schools. We're just beginning, so we're trying to feel our way through. And our issue is that Wethersfield is a very generous community. We have the Keene Foundation, which does a lot of after-school programs for the children. We have Dollars for Scholars. We have the very active PTOs in town. But one of the things we've noticed is that because of the tightness of the state budgets and so forth, there's really not a lot of extra money to do things above and beyond the routine supplies. So our goal was to try to decide what we're going to focus on first, and we have set as our first goal trying to improve and modify and bring up to 21st century standards some of our technology programs, and in particular our automotive program. Mm-hmm. For a couple of years now, that's been inactive, and we now have a teacher who's certified to teach that program. And I think the shift in terms of how people are looking at education is now not everybody could and should be going to a four-year school.
Right.
So we need to provide the students with some different experiences. And so we're trying to feel our way through how to connect maybe with businesses and grants rather than do the same kinds of things that our generous Keene Foundation or PTOs are doing. So any help that you can give us in that regard would certainly be appreciated.
Well, thank you. And we would welcome, again, that conversation. We've got a very long-standing investment in education, certainly in the traditional K through 12 and the curricula some of the curriculum you refer to, but also there's the recognition that the career pathways that individuals will take aren't all identical. There are those that will go through and matriculate and pursue their PhDs or their medical degrees or engineering degrees, and that's wonderful, and we need those individuals who have that passion and have that path. There are other individuals who will pursue career pathways, successful careers that we all need, that don't require an MBA or four-year degree or even a two-year degree, that do require skills beyond high school, but skills that are recognized by the industry. And I can tell you that I had some experience in this in my previous capacity before coming to Connecticut. I spent 6 years in Washington, D.C. with the Obama administration, and I was at the Department of Commerce heading up the Economic Development Administration. But the president made very clear, and Secretary Pritzker, that there was a priority that we began aligning our investments with the Labor Department to bring employers together to address what was a persistent, unfilled segment of the employment economy across the country, hundreds of thousands of jobs that were going unfilled that didn't require a four-year degree, didn't even require a two-year degree, but required those skills those vocational skills that you talked about, whether it was in automotive or machining or things that we as a country unfortunately got away from. You know, I remember in school, the shop class, the vocational classes. So two things happened. When the budget cuts hit, school districts, those were often the first places that were cut. The other thing that as a society we became somewhat guilty of was looking at those career paths as somehow inferior to individuals who were pursuing, whether it was information technology or science or things like that. And nothing could have been further from the truth. We lost almost a generation of young people who aspired to go into those vocations, work with their hands, understand critical thinking, and in certain segments of society got into this notion of sort of funneling everyone to college, and that just wasn't everyone's aspiration. It wasn't where everyone's skill set or desires aligned to. And we then found ourselves with a dearth of skilled individuals to fill those jobs that those employers were saying that they needed. And these weren't just jobs, these were careers that paid very good wages, careers that provided benefits, careers that provided opportunities for advancement. So from a federal standpoint, we found ourselves trying to play catch up to make those investments, but at the same time, the way education works in this country, it is a very localized a process. So to the extent that has been recognized and we as a foundation understand that our investments in education aren't limited to the traditional K through 12 and then going to the 2 and 4 year institutions, which is important, we are identifying in this current and this upcoming strategic plan, where are those opportunities that we can partner? Where are those opportunities that we can help direct resources that we have within the foundation, and then also we have donors that have expressed a very specific interest in helping to fund and support some of those career pathways that are beyond or an alternative to the 2-year and 4-year degrees. So, it shouldn't be an either or, it's both and. So to the extent that we begin to connect with and our donors get excited about that, to the extent that becomes a more pronounced part and a visible part of that, those are the types of partnerships that we will entertain and look forward to having that as a part of the offerings and resources that we direct, because I don't know what the most recent statistics are, but I can tell you that it was just, I also had a chance to travel across the country, and employer after employer said that if you give us a list of qualified individuals who can walk onto a shop floor and know how to, the basic operations of a CNC machine, They said, listen, we'll put our proprietary training into them. We'll do that last mile, but we need them to be able to step on the floor and understand just the basic components of a CNC machine or the basic components of a PLC. So to the extent that while we can't fix it across the country, we certainly have the ability to help address that here in the state of Connecticut and specifically within our region, especially in light of the fact that we've got major employers, Pratt & Whitney, Electric Boat, who are saying that as our workforce begins to age out, there are tens of thousands of jobs that are going to need to be filled. And while some of them are the PhDs and the engineering and the things like that, there are tens of thousands of them that don't require that. But the individuals, the men and women, need to be able to at least present themselves with a basic set of skills that then the companies are willing to make that last mile investment. So, and that's not something, as they're saying aging out, this isn't a 5-year or 10-year. They're saying this is starting to happen now and will only increase over the next several years. So shame on us as collectively as a community if we don't heed that and hear that and start making those investments in those programs now for young people, but people who might find themselves mid-career and underemployed, who now have a chance to matriculate to a job that is, it pays better wages and better benefits, and it keeps those industries here in the greater Hartford area. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Follow up on that. My name is Nicole Ferrari. I actually work with Sue with the Wethersfield Educational Foundation. Thank you. So just very quickly to follow up on that, there is a Manufacturing and Materials Institute that's funded through NSF down in New Haven that's associated with Southern Connecticut State and Yale. And they bring in science teachers and high school teachers to match them with people from Electric Boat, Sikorsky, to educate the teachers to pass on that information as to what jobs are out there for the students.
Right.
And that's something I would like to see in the greater Hartford area because kids, they don't know what they want to do. So they all come to Central and they're psychology majors and they don't know what they want to do. And exposing kids in high school to all of the options, not just the default 4-year, is so important. And teachers can be an access point to that. I don't know, are you familiar with any models like that, or is that something you guys would be interested in? Or could you just very quickly to follow up on Sue's comment? It
is something we'd be interested in. And I can tell you that there were discussions that we had, again, in my previous capacity in various communities across the country, that they, in many instances, high school was too late. They were saying we need to capture the imagination of these kids, these students, in middle school. So they not only capture the imagination of the students, but then involving the parents to get the parents to understand that, these are careers that should be and can be aspired to. Not, oh, I didn't get into, the 4-year Ivy League, and there's nothing wrong with that, so let me then sort of see what's left. But instead saying, no, the inclination and the interest in because these skills, these careers still, these aren't the manufacturing jobs of, I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, and it was a steel town. So 50 years ago in Youngstown, Ohio, if you had 8th grade education, but you had a strong work ethic and a strong back, you could leave 8th grade, figuratively, but probably literally too, 15, 16, 17 years old, go down to the plant, make a living to raise your family. But they said, here are the 5 steps we want you to do. Don't deviate. Don't ask any questions. Just do these 5 steps all day, every day, and we'll pay you, give you a good pension, and you'll take care of your family. So while they didn't require a degree, and some of those jobs don't require a degree now, the $1 billion, there was a company that invested $1 billion to expand a steel mill in Youngstown just a few years ago. So one of the things, they weren't employing 5,000 anymore, they're employing 500. But what they were saying is that, you still don't need necessarily a degree, but we do want you to be able to have critical thinking skills. If you're in that process and you see or think there's a better way to do it, we want to hear that. And there's no better place to get that from the people who are executing it. Or if you're seeing a flaw, instead of just saying, well, hey, the supervisor told me to do these 5 steps, we want you to say, oh, no, there's something wrong with this process. So to that extent, the earlier that we get into the school systems to capture the imaginations of the students, while at the same time helping the parents to understand that, if your son or daughter looks at this as a career path, this isn't something that we would hope that you wouldn't discourage them from, that this is something to aspire to So we would, models that we can draw on, or I can draw on from relationships and things that we saw, or, the model that you talked about in New Haven, down in New Haven, that could be replicated or scaled here in the school districts, are all important of a part of building a sustainable, diverse economy. We all hear it every day. This is now, a global arms race in terms of economic investment. Economies, investors aren't looking at specifically Wethersfield or Rocky Hill or Hartford or East Hartford, Manchester. They're looking at the region. And not only are they looking at this region, not just compared to the Midwest or the Mahoning Valley, or they're looking at this region, comparing it to regions across the globe. So to the extent that we position ourselves as competitive in terms of the workforce, to position ourselves competitive in terms, we've got a great manufacturing history here, but that history in and of itself might get us, a first look, but that's not going to close the deal. We've got to have a current workforce and a pipeline that says, okay, well, that's great. We got a current workforce, but what happens for this investment in 5 or 10 or 20 years? Is there a pipeline of skill and interest? So, we would welcome that, because at the end of the day, one of the things that I'm excited about is that the Hartford Foundation is going to be more active in terms of helping to make investments that help to position us as economically competitive as a region. We are not an economic development organization. We've got the Metro Hartford Alliance that is evolving into that role. There are other economic development organizations, but as the largest community foundation in the state, one of the largest in the country, in a region that has to be able to compete economically, we do believe that there is an appropriate role for us to play as a resource and as a support, whether it's through some of the educational initiatives or some of the more specific economic development opportunities to help position this. We can ill afford to sort of step back and wait and say, well, we're a community foundation, so economic development, well, we're not, the stakes are too high and the issues are too urgent for us to, not play our appropriate role here. And I'm appreciative and excited that the board feels the same way, and the staff and I are eager to help position the foundation to be, a catalytic agent when it comes to those things. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for being here. Tony Guerrero from Rock Hill. I just want to touch upon what Sue mentioned and that young lady. We're seeing a manufacturing boom in the state of Connecticut here. But also, I think what we need to get our hands around is young individuals that enter into manufacturing or technical schools are going out now and opening their own businesses too, which is obviously employing people,
right?
All right, which are good paying jobs. And that is very important in my eyes, because we haven't seen that for a while now. But Connecticut is on a rebound here in regards to job growth, manufacturing. It's just not Pratt, it's not Electric Boat, it's the other manufacturing businesses that are looking for individuals or people to do that. And from what I'm hearing from the small manufacturing groups out there, they're even willing to come to the schools to talk to those students and say, listen, there's a career for you. If you're interested in this, come see me. Even if it's after school, spend some time. Let me show you what this is all about and where you might lie in regards to the future here.
Right.
So I think it's very important that we hit upon those issues.
You're right, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because I didn't mean to suggest when we talk about Sikorsky and Pratt and UTC and Electric Boat, those are world-renowned companies that are recognized as leaders in their industry. But the majority of employment creation in this country, in this region, comes from those small, entrepreneurially driven, whether it's the machine shops or the suppliers or the service providers. That's where the growth in the economy that we've seen in this country, that started, 6 years ago after the Great Recession, that has been driven largely by these small entrepreneurial shops that he talked about. So we hear the big names and they play an important role, but that's where growth happens. And to your point of supporting entrepreneurship here in this region, I'm not from here, but I'm very aware of the proud history of entrepreneurship that has created these great companies that we all talk about. They didn't start as these Fortune 500 companies. They started with an idea and a skill and a couple of people getting together and providing a service or a product. and there are still hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them across this region. So to the extent that we also facilitate that entrepreneurial thinking in our young people, some of them may ultimately want to be entrepreneurs. Other of them say, well, and employers are saying, even if you come work from us, we want you to have an entrepreneurial mindset. So to the extent that, you know, that is also an essential part of our environment and the environment that we're trying to create, you're absolutely right. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes, Matthew? Matt, we'll go here first. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, yes, ma'am. Yep.
My name is Jane Ondochuk. I live in Rocky Hill, but I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, so I'm very familiar with a steel mill culture.
Where in Western Pennsylvania?
A small town called Ambridge, halfway between Pittsburgh and Beaver Falls.
Got it. Okay. We'll get along. Well, half the town was Steelers fan, half the town of Youngstown was Browns fan, so we do get along.
I'm not a sports-oriented person at all, so half the time if someone mentions a team, I don't even know what kind of ball that is. They have to tell me. But I'd like to start out with a compliment. I came here today because I received a postcard in the mail inviting me, but the way I became familiar with your name several years ago is you had public service announcements on National Public Radio. Very heartwarming stories of goodness and kindness. And it just warmed my heart. I loved hearing that, and I haven't heard them for a long time, so I hope you will bring that back.
Okay.
A second item, I had no idea that your organization had anything to do with lobbying until I registered for this event. So I'd like to hear more about your lobbying, hopefully for the public good,
Sure,
as opposed to corporate good.
absolutely. So first of all, I can see her smiling from ear to ear. Our Vice President of Communications, she and her team, Nancy Benben, I'm sure, you know, help guide the voice of the foundation. And I'm not sure which campaign she was referring, Words to Give By or Words to Give By campaign. So, you know, the validation for that, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see that again. So thank you for mentioning that. And yes, we are involved. And I don't know if Alyssa Gordon is here. She is here. So we are registered as a lobbyist. And to your point, it is absolutely for the public good. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. And while permitted to register as a lobbyist, obviously we are very much limited and focused on the areas in which we lobby. Particularly, we have the blessing of our board of directors, one of which, Marlene Ibsen, is here with us. So to that end, we think it is essential that the voice of the Community Foundation, which represents the voice of our donors and our constituents and our nonprofits, that we do lend that to issues of public policy. And we have been doing that in an increasingly visible and appropriate way. Because as the state legislature, goes about its decisions in terms of resource allocations and priorities in public policy, there are times when those decisions intersect with our work. There's a set of values that we have on our wall that every employee sees every day when they come in. And when those values are challenged or when issues of public concern intersect, I believe we have an obligation to raise our voice to that. It is not enough to sort of sit silent and say, well, if we say something, someone may criticize. Well, that might be the case, but if we are going to be true to the mission that we have, true to the expectations that our donors have entrusted us with that comes an obligation to lobby and speak to the public good. I've had an opportunity to, most recently, testify before the State Fiscal Commission, the State Commission on Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth, about, this wasn't us saying good or bad. This is us saying that the status quo is untenable. And not only did we do it, we have been fortunate to be able to work with the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven, Eastern Community Foundation, and Fairfield County Community Foundation, where together, those four foundations that represent a significant portion of the state's population and have a significant asset base, weighed in on some of those issues. So issues of regional concern, whether it's the Greater Hartford region or statewide concern, we very much feel that it's appropriate for us to exercise that voice. And that being said, there are national issues that intersect. Connecticut doesn't exist in the void outside of what happens in Washington, D.C. So, no, we are not chasing every tweet that appears on Twitter. We are not looking to engage in rhetoric and visceral, discussion that is not productive. But there are issues with respect to immigration. We have had a history and investments in working with nonprofits, appropriately when it came to the benefits of immigration and how that has been a benefit to our regions. So when those things arise, we are very deliberate. And again, this isn't a reflexive position that we take, but we think that there is more to be lost by, standing silent when those issues are presented, with respect to and we always look at it through the prism of our values. We always look at the prism not just to react for the sake of reacting. So this isn't a political prism we look at this through. This is our values, our investment, our mission, our expectations that we have from our stakeholders. And to that extent, that's something that we've been engaging in. So Alyssa and her team lead that. The board has supported it. There's tough decisions that come along with that at times, and there are, I'm sure, criticisms that we will engender. But there's also criticism that we can engender by sitting silent. So you don't let the criticism drive the decision. You make the decision and you live with it. So thank you for pointing that out. Sure. Matthew.
Thanks for coming, Jay.
Sure.
I'm going to hit on three, and as quickly as I can, three what I'll call local issues that I'm not sure are unique to Wethersfield. They might be similar in many other towns, but it's sort of at least what I think I'm seeing and what I'm hearing sort of in my position here. And they are as follows. The first is we have a great relationship with you when it comes to immersing, or the beginning of a program to immerse immigrants into Wethersfield. And we've got a lot of immigrants that are coming into Wethersfield, and we're trying to develop and immerse them into our culture in Wethersfield and Greater Connecticut, Connecticut and Greater Hartford. But I guess my thoughts to you are, as you develop programs, that whether they do it in Wethersfield or they do it in Glastonbury or Hartford or wherever it is, and I know Rocky Hill has their own a group of individuals that are coming from outside the state and outside the country, is that you do it with an eye to solve the problem, to have genuine success. And while we're at the beginning of developing a really strong core relationship with the Hartford Foundation in Wethersfield, and I'm sure other towns are too, but have the eye and actually, instead of moving the needle just a little bit, that we're going to have a genuine success. And I would suggest to you that instead of having small successes in a lot of different areas, have a real genuine, we solve this problem in a couple areas. That would, and whether that's in Wethersfield, as we develop our immersion techniques to make sure that everyone that comes into Wethersfield becomes part of the fabric of our society and brings their culture with them, but also immerses themselves into our fabric. We would see that in early childhood education, which has been talked about before, but where we see our numbers declining in early childhood education because in other cultures that necessarily isn't a part of their culture to go into the public schools, because maybe where they came from they didn't have that. Mm-hmm. In our culture, we can do that to give them the skills so that they succeed when they get to kindergarten, they succeed when they get to third grade, and they succeed with all the rest of the things that we've talked about here today. That's what I think a lot of Wethersfield wants. And if we could work with you to solve that problem completely for Wethersfield, and then that can be a beacon to all the rest of the towns saying, Wethersfield did it, we did it with the Hartford Foundation, now we can do that somewhere else. That's a thought for you. Okay. Next thought is, and this is maybe hyper-local, and I think I saw this in some other areas, volunteerism is actually down. And I don't think I'm unique in this statement, but we are right now slimming down our government for streamlining it, not for, we're a volunteer government. This is New England, right? This is a volunteer government, essentially. And we're slimming down our government because we can't find the people, or people aren't volunteering to create new committees to do good things in society. And so we found a lot of vacancies, and we're slimming government down for that. Wouldn't it be great if there was a way to have some type of a hub spot for volunteerism, and or some way in which you can train us, or we can work with you to reach out into the communities, whether it's even going door to door, not for politicians, right, but because somebody wants to learn how to, wants to be the baseball coach or the dance coach, or to volunteer to spruce up the town because they care about some area or their neighborhood, very even hyper local. I think that is certainly a need. I don't think Wethersfield's unique, as I said before. in that area. So that would be something we'd like to work with you with. And the last thing, which might be slightly different than maybe the usual, is as a town, we are working with doing some really impressive, what I call heavy lifts, some really strong things, large developments on our thoroughfares in order to work on our tax base, to have more money to do the good things in town. And I think your foundation is you're one of the big gorillas around here in a good way, right? We can work with you and your connections and putting together all the pieces that are necessary for those really important lifts, working with our national delegation, our state delegation, the agencies, and our town and brokers and donors in order to make those multi-tens of million dollars investments, not just the $100,000 investments. And I could easily foresee the Hartford Foundation working with the leaderships of the town, not just elected leaders, stakeholder leaders, leaders in the town that are all in this room that want to do something not small, but something significant, something that will be changing for generations. And that's where I think the Hartford Foundation can really come in and helping bring together the right people for the significant changes, not just the minimal ones.
Boy. So let me, all three of those, and I say this not to placate or to patronize, but three issues that you talked about, two of which are topics of discussion as we speak with respect to our strategic plan. So let me start with the first one. This notion of finding an area, using data and information to find areas where there are significant disparities, where there's high need or high opportunity, for us to focus and target our resources to make a difference. There's an approach that some organizations take that you spread your resources, you try to placate and keep people just satisfied enough, you take that sharp hunger pain off, but at the end of the day, you've not really solved the problem. You've just kept people at bay, or you've kept the issue at bay. We are contemplating, and the board is going to ultimately, have to make a decision, but we are wrestling with this notion of a fundamental shift in how we begin to look at some of these issues that would have us use information and data and work with the stakeholders to identify those areas, areas of disparity, areas of high need that would, have us targeting significant investment, resources, knowledge to, be able to make that difference, to solve that issue, and then say, okay, now can this be replicated or can this be scaled? And that's a tough decision if that means that you can't do everything for everyone, or you can't even do as much as you used to in such a broad area. So, we're wrestling with that as we speak, and that's something that, our board is going to wrestle with, and by the end of this year, we're going to have to take a position. So, to hear that, you haven't been, I'm assuming you haven't been in those meetings with us, but to hear that as an interest from, some of our communities is validating, because, that means that we can't be all things. Even we've been blessed with $1 billion endowment. Even with that, you can't do all things and be all things to all people. It just doesn't work. So what rationale do we use to begin to focus those resources for a period to hopefully solve, or if not solve, significantly mitigate or make significant progress? Your first issue. Your second issue is something we've heard in every one of our listening sessions: the decline in volunteerism, the dearth of individuals who are, people are busy, we get that, people have priorities, but our country, and more importantly, our communities have thrived because people have been willing to volunteer their time, their talent, their energy. Some people are fortunate and able to do it full time. Others do it between their job and taking care of their family, or they're doing it just enough and they're running. So clearly there isn't an easy answer, but because we've heard it universally, and you're right, the towns here are not unique in that regard. It is something that we're putting on the agenda to figure out how can we help facilitate that discussion. I don't have an easy answer. There isn't an easy answer, but it's a universal challenge And one of the many things that's great about our country or great about our communities is that when we are faced with these universal challenges, we typically then figure out a way to come together to figure out how to address that. So that issue of volunteerism is something we've heard in every one of the communities, that part of what we can do early on is how do we then convene those communities around that issue? Are there approaches in other parts of the country that have shown some success? If so, how can we connect and bring some of those ideas here?
Offline, I have a couple ideas for you later.
Good. Okay. Well, that's what we're here for. The third one, something near and dear to my heart and all of our hearts. You talked about the Hartford Foundation being in a position to help, bring transformative investment, your word that we've used, catalytic investment, not to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, but to the tune of millions or tens of millions of dollars in projects or approaches that would be a defining issue or a catalytic issue in those communities. I can tell you that the board of the foundation feels the same way, that we invest through our traditional grant making between $33 and $35 million a year on average for the past several years. And that's important, resources that help nonprofits and advance the community. What the board has said, while that's important, we're going to continue that, we also need to look at where are there opportunities that we can partner with public sector, private sector, other donors to identify those opportunities that are, again, catalytic and transformative. And I hope I don't get in trouble. I'll go out on a limb here. So we've been looking at that through what we've been calling an opportunity investment lens. That, again, the board has been 100% supportive and excited and has given us and has charged us to go out and put together an approach and a program that begins to discuss and analyze those opportunities. So while it's exciting, but they're like, what does opportunity investments mean? So as we put together what we, are thinking of is, to me, this is more of, and we just rolled this out, so my board member has not heard this. So hopefully I don't get in trouble. And the committee, right, she's a board member, but she's on the committee that is overseeing this. Is, we're contemplating calling them, ignition investments, because when you think of the word ignite, it's to start something. It means to we think of set a fire, but to initiate change, something that would ignite a series of events or a project that would have those characteristics that you have described. So, I'm excited because, the board has taken this seriously and is looking at the resources we have and figuring out an appropriate way to allocate resources that the Hartford Foundation could be involved and will be involved and has resources to bring to those types of transformative projects. Now, again, we have 29 communities, and each of those communities could probably come up with 10 different projects. So it's not going to be easy, and it is going to require tough decisions. But just the spirit of the fact that here's a foundation that's been around for 93 years, has done its traditional grant making. That grant making is essential to the quality of life and the partnerships that we have. But the board has recognized that's not enough. We sit in a community of great need, a region of great need, that doesn't have the catalytic players that we had 50 years ago, but that still has people and organizations willing to invest. But we want to be a catalytic, igniting force to some of those projects. So it's exciting. It is new. But to the extent that we can help bring some of that energy and ignition around those projects, you're right in our wheelhouse. So we're putting a program together, and it's it generated a lot of excitement. There's obviously uncertainty in the unknown. There's risk associated with it that weren't risks that we were facing before. But the board has said, we understand that if we're going to lead, if we're going to make a transformative mark on these communities over and above our traditional grant making, we've got to evaluate those risks. We've got to go into it with our eyes wide open, but we've also got to be willing to put our money where our mouth is. So, good. Appreciate it. Thank you. Let's come over here. I'll come back to you.
Hi. My name is Ann Hartman. I work for the Central Connecticut Health District. I
don't know if y'all could hear that. I'm the assistant director of the Central Connecticut Health District, and my focus is on community health, so I'm excited to be here. I'm a Midwesterner as well. Nice to,
Where?
Michigan.
Very good. So I get along with Michigan. Right.
I don't like Ohio State, though, just so I have two pieces that I want to bring up. I'll save the happier one for last.
Okay.
And the initial one is not necessarily happy topic. It's not a happy topic.
Sure.
So at the health district, we deal with data about what is not great in terms of the health of our communities. So your focus on vibrant communities probably means something different to all of us. But in the health district, it means for us health. And I think that we look at that very broadly, mental health and physical health. And so throughout our state and our nation, we're dealing with the opioid crisis. And so we, in the two towns here, we also cover Newington and Berlin. We have seen the escalation in deaths from opioids as well. In fact, we have our third, some of the people in this room will probably be there, our third opioid stakeholder forum in 2 days. And at that, we have working groups that have been developed. It is a stakeholder, it's stakeholders from all our communities. And we are, I might be stealing a little bit of thunder by talking about this now, but our group that's focused on recovery is looking to find a way to have some sort of a recovery center. We have a lot of people that have overdosed. We don't even have accurate numbers on them, but we have in our in our 4 towns, we had 36 deaths just this past year. The previous year, it was 13. And if you extrapolate out how many overdoses there were, that's huge.
Right.
So there's a number of mental health issues, and we're looking to find a way for recovery to become a part of our culture, and that it's not pushed off to the side, and it's not hidden addiction, substance use disorder as a health issue that needs to be addressed. So we're looking to start a model. Our recovery group has been trying to develop a model that could be a center where people can go, where they can find treatment around the clock, perhaps mental health and substance abuse treatment 24/7, not a hospital. So that's way down the road. That's their long-term thinking. But we're really looking to change what it means to be in recovery, and that people don't have to go and hide in church basements. So that's kind of one piece. So we're dealing with that health problem. In terms of, there's also a prevention group and there's a response group. So our first responders have been working on tasks. So that's kind of a mental health side. We deal with other mental health issues in the health district. We see the results. Hoarding, for example. I know you probably all heard of that. We deal with that a lot in the health district. The basis of that is, of course, the mental health issue. So there's something that's happening in addition to that. In both of our towns, in Rocky Hill and Wethersfield, they both have bike walk groups. And the town of Wethersfield is incredibly moving ahead on something called Complete Streets. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
So talk about a vibrant community, because that brings in some economic development. It looks at across the age groups, people of all levels of ability and disability to use to roads and make them more, make the community more vibrant and more access for people. So that's something that the health district has been sort of supporting, and I think those are features that the younger age groups are looking for in communities. Vibrant ways to get around, access to public transport, and so those are things that I think are really great about these two towns. And Wethersfield in particular has moved. They have a committee that's formed, subgroups that have formed to look at Complete Streets. And getting back to the public health standpoint, Thomas Frieden, who used to be head of Centers for Disease Control, his quote that I love is, physical activity is the closest thing we have to a wonder drug, and it helps with both physical health and mental health.
Yep.
So I sort of see that as a possible piece for vibrant communities, and then to make sure that we have people who are mentally healthier. It also helps with that, and we also need to deal with the addiction issue. It's huge in our country. So, sorry, that part of that was a little bit of a downer, but it's sort of the reality.
Well, it's a sober issue, but I can tell you that that is not inconsistent when we talk about our Vibrant Communities initiative. Probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, we hosted a donor briefing on the opioid crisis, because we have donors who are, as you described, seeking to support approaches that don't have people relegated to the church basements, and that. And again, so this is why I love the fact that and that was very well attended, but clearly we could have had another 200 people there, and we were able to bring in some local recognized experts to talk about the treatment process and the whole spectrum of how communities are approaching that. So very much something that we would look for. That's completely within our focus area of vibrant communities, as is when you talked about complete streets. In my former life before Washington, D.C., I was the mayor of Youngstown, Ohio. So that was an issue that I and others took to heart in terms of being able to bring those approaches to a community that, you're right, cover the spectrum of constituents, from the youngest to our citizens who were in the different stages of life. From an economic standpoint, bringing a sense of vibrancy of the community, and that is how post-industrial cities like that was one of the ways that we were seeking to become competitive, to be an attractive place to the generations that wouldn't necessarily we understood that we found ourselves between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. And in Ohio, we found ourselves often in the shadow of Cincinnati, Columbus, the three big C's. So while Youngstown was a mid-sized to larger city, it wasn't one of the largest. So that notion of how to make a community like that more appealing, more attractive, to retain the residents that we had, and also to potentially attract others. So both of those things. And even as we shift into our next strategic plan, there is an impact area that speaks to community development. And again, an issue that runs the gamut from things like complete streets to the approaches that are used to address the opioid crisis, and so many other the things that challenge the social fabric. So, that's why also the benefit that we derive from having these conversations and hearing from you, because like I said, we're not coming up with a strategic plan out of thin air. There's data that we're using, there's information that we're using, but as I said earlier, having the benefit of hearing directly from our communities and our stakeholders about areas of focus or importance for us as a foundation to be moving toward is exceptionally critical for us. So to know and to be able to go to the board and say, here are the framework of the strategic plan, here is where we've derived information and data and firsthand discussions with our stakeholders, for the board to have confidence that this is a strategic plan that is consistent with the needs that we're hearing in our community and our region. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Jay, we met in March. My name's Jackie Farnham. I manage the Estate and Business Planning Council, and I'm a chartered advisor in philanthropy on the non-client facing side, meaning I work with charities. One of the charities I'm working with is Advisors in Philanthropy Foundation. One of the initiatives we have is to educate the public about 664 section of the tax code. I mean, everybody understands 529 and they understand 401k, but unless you're ultra wealthy, have you ever heard of 664? Which is the section that covers charitable trusts. So we have a public education campaign that we're just starting now. And one of my questions for you, first of all, is would you be willing to sit down with me and discuss that initiative and how maybe you can collaborate with us on that,
sure,
in educating the public?
As long as I can invite my vice president of development and some people who are smarter than I to make sure that they can explain it to me. So if I can invite them in, I'd be welcome to have that conversation.
Well, and then the other thing is in that education of the middle class is where we're really targeting. We're looking at we're doing like a target campaign in Florida right now, and we're using the chambers and a Senate district to create a pooled income fund where the middle class can contribute. Everybody needs funding. I mean, this is the problem. Where do we get the funding? So the middle class they don't think they can contribute. They're worried about their retirement and their kids' college education, but they're not educated about charitable vehicles that will create an income for them later in life.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is harness the great wealth transfer, which is taking place now in the next 50 years, and making sure that that money is stewarded properly. So do you have anything within your community foundation where, say we come up with something in Rocky Hill right now, we need funding for mental health for our kids. If we end up owning the landfill, we're going to need funding to properly cap it. If the residents had an issue, and you were talking about this before, where you have, I forget what you called it, specific issues, and we wanted to create a pooled income fund, let's say, which is going to create income for them later in life, and the basis goes to charity.
Right.
Is that something that the community foundation can help with?
Is Deborah here?
Deb Rossi, no.
Right. Oh, she's not here. Okay.
You're not here?
So I don't know. Deborah and I have had a number of conversations about tools that we have or tools that we are contemplating having. So I would be disingenuous to tell you that I could give you that answer off the top of my head. But what I will do is we'll facilitate a conversation with Deborah and her team to see if that is either something that we offer, or is it something that is potentially something that we are discussing. We are looking at all of our products and services. When I say products and services, I mean the things that we offer our donors or potential donors, with the recognition that we are seeking to inspire and engage donors who may have not ever thought of themselves as philanthropic in the traditional sense. Individuals who are working, don't have a 7-figure or 8-figure net worth, who are still got a kid they got to put through college, and a kid, I've got a 7-year-old, I can't even imagine what college is going to be in 10 years. So to inspire and engage and excite donors who may have never thought of themselves as donors to the Hartford Foundation. So I can tell you, I'm looking forward to connecting, Deborah and her team, to have that discussion, to see if those are along the array of things that we would be considering. So. There's ways to do that. Oh, and I'll end on this. And I'm sorry, I promised to get you out of here for the concert, and we've just been going and going. So I'll end on this, that part of what we are also excited about, as we've heard a number of issues that are germane and, to use your term, some of these hyper-local issues. We are giving thought to what is the mechanism, or what is something that we could use that would help to anchor our commitment in the communities, that would allow the communities to make those decisions, that we would work with the communities to provide resources that would be within the purview of the community, and that the community can make those decisions and those determinations, and it doesn't mean that we are still doing our funding of nonprofits, but to really put resources and tools in the hands of the community to address those priorities in a way that is most important to them. So we're talking about it. We've started talking to the board about it. We hope that at the end of this year we will have more to share with you. And I'll end on this. The fact that you've spent so much of your time here with us is invaluable, and we appreciate that. And this isn't a one and done where we're, thanks, check the box, we got another community, we're moving on. We capture all of this. As I talked about, this is us using this to inform our strategic plan. You will hear more from us throughout the year, and particularly as we get toward the end of the year and have our celebration of giving, our Greater Together, which really recognizes and celebrates our donors, our nonprofits, and all of you, each of you are going to be invited to that, and we hope that you can attend, because part of what that program will be is us talking about what we've heard and what we're going to do with what we've heard. I will also end on this. There is a card. You've already filled yours out. Boy, you were just on the ball here. That's Sally. If you have more to share, if you would fill this card out and either leave it with the staff where it's already posted as prepaid, and share some additional thoughts, or there's some questions on here, and share this with us. Again, this is information that we're not just filing away. This is actively a part of our shaping and informing of our plan and our activities. So thank you all for sharing your time, for sharing your thoughts with us, for the issues that are important to Rocky Hill, and Wethersfield. And we look forward to this is an ongoing conversation relationship that we have with all of you as members of your community, as communities in this region, and look forward to some exciting things, and hopefully that you'll join us at our celebration later on this year, a celebration of our communities. That being the case, there's a concert that's probably about to start. Don't forget about the 175th Party in the Park, July 21st. And okay, so the anniversary. There haven't been 175 parties. Well, there probably have been 175 parties if but join the folks in Rocky Hill for that celebration. Thank you all very much for coming out.